Alright guys, HyDra again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Championship Saturday at the World Championship. Today we go from 6 teams down to only 2 grand finalists. 4 teams eliminated from the tournament today, and who are they going to be? 7th seed versus 8th seed. OpTic versus Boston. Those are your 2 teams from the regular season in the winners finals. Can you believe it? What a set of storylines we have had so far. The losers bracket is setting up to be really tasty as well today, and Shotzzy says that the way they're performing right now, they are undeniably confident against anyone that OpTic were to face, and in many respects they have absolutely the winners bracket match they would have wanted. But historically, certainly looking at this season, these OpTic Boston games have always been bangers. What's going to happen today? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. We do again have to start really with the elephant in the room, because there has been more discussion as to, okay, what's going to happen this weekend? Are there going to be more fans there that got weekend tickets or, couldn't make it for Thursday, Friday, which hopefully is the case anyway. I'm expecting it to be a little more lively. And to be fair, OpTic are doing well. There might be some local people that say, you know what, I'll go along regardless and see, part of the green wall or whatever. But there was some talk, okay, why is it in Kitchener? Because last year I was in Dallas, or Allen, it was just north of Dallas, but still it was close enough to Dallas. It was like 30 minutes drive from downtown Dallas, whereas Kitchener's a bit different. I know that Aches mentioned it last night on the flank, the tweet that Adamu did, roasting Scrappy, and you could see that like the ride to the airport was about 50 miles. So, maybe not optimal. But there was questions, okay, why is it here? Because last year's champs in Allen, there was like 7,000 people there. I'm pretty sure it was the most attended event in the history of COD, and that was pretty good. Do we capitalize on that momentum for this year's World Championship? Well, not necessarily. And I think the point is, it's not like the viewership isn't necessarily there. These were the day one numbers. OpTic versus FaZe peaked at about 188,000. I looked it up again for yesterday. You guys can just about see Toronto versus OpTic peaked at over 200,000 viewers. These are pretty damn decent numbers, right? Okay, World Championships here. That's Friday at the World Championship. I mean, imagine we get an OpTic FaZe finals. There's still a lot of interest and viewers and community around competitive COD. That's not disappeared. It's just people aren't at the event, and I can't necessarily blame them. So, people were talking about this in a thread on Reddit. I just thought this is kind of interesting. People were saying that maybe Mississauga could have been a better option, and there was also discussions that Kitchener Tourism, as a local council or whatever, have been getting involved here. Maybe this explains it a little bit. People were talking about this article from August 2024, and they're talking about running esports events. Not, I don't think, specifically Call of Duty, but they're talking about the Rocket League Major here, and they're saying that the region of Waterloo plans to invest $200,000 in the municipal accommodation tax reserve to support hosting an esports tournament. So there has been a feeling that the Kitchener local council, I don't know exactly how this is described, let's say the region of Waterloo, was planning in August to drop a load of bread to get esports events to come to Kitchener. So would you be surprised if this kind of, not even a tax break, but simply a stipend, money given over, is the reason why we're doing it in Kitchener? Wouldn't surprise me, right? Maybe it makes sense for Toronto, it makes sense for the league, and I understand it from a budget monetary perspective, but unfortunately someone had to sign off on this at the end of the day, and I'm not sure that's really gone to plan. Challenges has been dramatic. We'll talk in tomorrow really how things are going on there, because the teams are effectively getting into the bracket play. The big scalp really was Team Notorious, Afro's team that I was really hoping would do well, because I wanted to see Afro play at the World Cup, because he's been so good, and he still was really good this tournament. But they played a series against the Stallions. Afro had a 1.2, his teammates had 0.8, and they bomb out. So they didn't make it through their GSL group. Royal Spartans got the job done, Cruz, Gunsy, Dak, and Wiz, and the Stallions, they made it. Trakes had like a 1.4 in the series that he played against Team Notorious. That was pretty impressive. So those guys qualified through. As I say, we'll talk more in due course how that's going. But let's talk about the COD League matches, because wow, this weekend has been crazy. I did want to mention this because I missed it the other day. The Esports Awards came out with the greatest COD player of all time. I think they deleted this because it was too controversial. Clayster was in the replies and saying you guys are clowns for effectively putting Shotzzy of Simp in the mix. If I'm not in the mix, for whatever. Clay thinks he's second best ever. I think maybe Clay's maybe fourth best ever. But he's certainly, right in the mix there, and I don't think Clay was particularly happy being eliminated from or excluded from this. But, anyway, it is what it is. At the end of the day, Kremp's still the GOAT for me, but Simp and Shotzzy getting in here was interesting because people were like, there was lots of replies saying, damn, Shotzzy, how can you even have him in the convo? This guy's been terrible this season. They put this out a few days ago, right? But look, if you look at Shotzzy from a pure COD player perspective, then no, he's not in the conversation yet, although that may change in the next couple of days. From an overall like esports player perspective, then yeah, sure, he's in the mix because he won the ring in Halo as well back in 2018. But now all of a sudden, Shotzzy, after having a really difficult year, people are saying, hang on a second here, if OpTic win this event, Shotzy's legacy is crazy. And like, it already is crazy, but it goes completely different level to the point where this conversation starts to be somewhat valid, depending on how much you value World Championship rings, at least to put Shotzzy right in the convo. So it's been a fascinating tournament so far. LA Thieves, they're out of there already. Cinder talked about it. We're definitely going to talk about it as well over the coming days after this tournament is over. What happened with Thieves, where they go from here. Cinder says, eyes forward to the World Cup. Obviously, this weekend wasn't us. Unfortunate result. Incredible team. Appreciate the supporters. Going to do everything in my power to finish the year strong. But I think you need his teammates to get on board with that as well, to be honest. Of course, Cinder's the coach of the team. You know what I'm saying. This is a bit of a throwback to last year's World Championship win. I mean, you guys can see the crowd there in like Texas, right, compared to what we had this season, but it is what it is. Maybe for Sunday it's gonna magically all come together, especially with OpTic potentially being there on the Sunday, but only 2 teams of course make it. 4 teams get eliminated today. But OpTic, they looked sensational against FaZe in the first rounds, of course, winning the Hacienda hardpoint. This is going to be a very interesting decision for what OpTic play, because they are clearly right now incredibly confident, and Shotzzy makes that very evident himself, and we'll see what he has to say on that in a second. Sometimes, you know, pride can come before the fall, as it were. Being overconfident, as you could argue Thieves may well have been for this tournament, could be a team's downfall, in the sense that you don't want to square up on maps that the other team is really good at for no reason. I think there was a feeling that yesterday against Surge, Thieves didn't really give them much respect. And look, there is a grey area there, isn't there? Because if you give the other team too much respect, you might play too scared. If you give the team no respect at all, you give yourself the option to get caught off guard, right? Because you're just running it down. Those are things that teams have to deal with. But equally, if you're a team like OpTic, you don't necessarily need to play the other team on their best map, even if you're really confident at it. We know that OpTic do like to do this, and it goes both ways, because if you're an OpTic team, hypothetically today, and you're playing Boston, you know that Boston really like playing Hacienda Search and Destroy. That's like their bread and butter. Maybe OpTic also feel really confident on it because of their scrims, and I made the point a lot over the last few weeks that S&D was going to be massive this tournament. Boston have been the best Search and Destroy team looking so far, but also maybe it's OpTic because they've only played 2 rather than 4 because they've been winning all the other game modes as well. And OpTic Search also looks really devastating. So I think that's going to be a fascinating story today, how the Search and Destroys go between OpTic and Boston. Certainly that map 2, if we get a map 5, that's going to be crazy as well. But also, I guess if you're OpTic in that series, you know, do you need to play Boston on their best maps? No, but if you're super confident that, like, if you win that map off them, then you're going to have all the confidence in the world. And maybe you just got to go with the flow right now. But like, this feels like an awful long time ago when OpTic, and this is the 15th of March, they lost 18 consecutive maps. And look, I'm going to share the clip from Shotzzy in a second, what he has to say about, you know, some of the disrespect that his team was getting this season. And I'll be honest, it was totally justified for a large part of the year. Like when Shotzzy came out on stream and said, damn, you guys really think we're terrible? You think we're not making champs? And, you know, when he said that, it was genuinely a question of like, all right, you know, go on and prove it then, make it to champs, which they did. And they did make it to champs. But in many respects, I think without the Mercury's, let's say, gift from the gods, as it were, with the Beans visa issues, Mercury's going to Toronto, then him becoming available, Cloud9 trying to get him, Toronto trying to put him on their bench, and then OpTic swooped in last minute and got the deal done. This would have been a very different end to the season, right? Like, I have a very hard time believing that this team with Skyz was capable of doing what they are presently doing. So, you know, there is obviously 2 parts to it, but equally, there has been lots of criticism around Shotzzy, maybe lesser around Dashy, and maybe even lesser around Huke. But Shotzzy especially has been very much under the microscope this season, and to be fair, for good reason. But I will say, back in January, when he did those tweets about other teams not knowing how to win, I mean, man, I can see the timeline if Shotzzy wins champs and makes a tweet like to that effect. You know what I'm saying? That would be spectacular, and I hope that it happens. It would be like an immense storyline to cap off the season. but this does feel like an awful long time ago. And I know the guys on the flank were making the point that OpTic, they've had difficult season, maybe going into champs with less pressure than other teams. I think probably part of that is true, but equally now the pressure's on because OpTic after yesterday are undoubtedly the favourites for the tournament. The only other team left that, you know, people will say could be favourites over them is FaZe, and OpTic 3-0'd them in the first round and are still in the winner's bracket. So now the pressure's kind of on, right? You're turning up to Saturday and you're like, hang on a second here, we might actually do this. We're playing Boston in the winners finals. It doesn't get any better than that. And against a Toronto team who have been, you know, a threat for some of the year, they slammed them like beyond belief, right? We saw the numbers yesterday. It looked like one of those series that happens online sometimes when the team complains about being on 50 ping more than the other opposition and they lose their head as a result. Like, you don't often see numbers like this on LAN, certainly not at the World Championship, right? And Dashy keeps it simple. He just says, yeah, GG's Ultra, not like GG's Ultra, slam them or whatever. It's like, yeah, well played. Boston tomorrow, eyes forward. Let's keep focused. I mean, we know that Shotzzy's been bringing the energy. No Pred, of course, on the team any longer, but it doesn't mean that Shotzzy isn't still bringing the hype. I don't know what it is about this guy in the World Championship, man, but he turns up here. Him and Huke have been such a great duo. So impressed by Huke. I mean, this guy deserves so much praise for the way that he's played, I would say all season, the way that he's adapted, the way that he's just sat down and grinded. I think what Shotzzy had to say on the podcast the other day, and when Huke revealed that he's been basically sitting, he's not been playing much extra COD necessarily, he's been watching a lot of VOD, preparing, understanding, and I think that Boston are a team in a very similar boat. I'll share this clip here from Shotzzy when he talks about how confident OpTic presently are, why this means so much to him for this tournament and for the season, given the season they've had. And also, then we'll talk about Boston and what that series potentially looks like.
You mentioned on a podcast that you guys have been destroying people in scrims to the point where they're not even trying by the third map. Were you hesitant to say that publicly, or are you guys just that confident right now?
I mean, I'm that confident. I've always said what I truly think. Other people, you know, they use it as engagements or, you know, they roast me, but I don't really care at the end of the day. I only care about what my teammates think of myself, so I'm excited to, you know, play against the Breach.
With the season you guys have had, what would becoming back-to-back champions mean to you and the team?
Oh, it would mean everything. I want this one the most, simply because of how the season went. Everyone always, you know, talking down on, you know, my teammates' name, including myself, so I'm ready to, you know, prove them wrong.
So it doesn't get much more remarkable than this. The 7th seed, OpTic Texas, and the 8th seed for champs, Boston Breach. Boston had a pretty good year, but they never really converted that into any substantial results. They just about scraped into the World Championship in the end. And these are the two teams that are going to be in the winners' finals. You've barely ever seen champs stories to quite this extent. And we usually say it. The team that either wins the event or makes the grand final, the event before the World Championship, they will very often go on to win it or get very close to it. And that's usually the case when champs is 2 weeks after the final event. But with a month off, maybe it's a very different story. But also for Thieves, you know, they had so much in their favour. We talked about it a lot, right? The new patch that was not played on it was stayed on the patch that Thieves dominated the last couple of events on. So, you know, no excuses as far as they're concerned. And OpTic have just put in a serious shift. This is a crazy stat line going into the Saturday of this World Championship, that the top 5 KDs in the game this weekend, 4 of them are OpTic players, and 1 of them is aBeZy. And if Shotzzy got a couple more kills, it would have been the top 4 being all OpTic players. Merc with a 1.4, Dashy with near enough a 1.3, and both of the SMGs in the mid 1.2s. Crazy stuff. Even Karma the coach, he was the first player to ever win back-to-back World Championships. He did it in 2013 Black Ops 2, 2014 Ghost. He could do the same thing as a coach, but they've got to get past a couple more teams before they get to that point. This is the way the bracket stands, and I'll talk Boston OpTic first of all, because obviously OpTic are going to be the heavy favourites for this series. Boston have scraped through a couple of Neslos. Can they Neslo again? I think the answer is they can. Will they is obviously a very different question. I would favour OpTic pretty heavily because, you know, I think that OpTic in the search and destroys, they should be very solid, but I think there's always a chance that Boston here come out and deliver some damage. I think that OpTic have to be very careful that they don't overlook Boston as a threat. I don't think they will, because Boston have just 3-2'd Thieves, 3-2'd Heretics. If they can do that to those two teams, they can do it to you. And OpTic will recognise that, I think. And also, it's got to be said, this season, the games that OpTic have played against Boston have pretty much all been bangers, right? Now, I know that at times this OpTic team has not been the same team as we see today, but just hear me out a little bit, right? Opening game of the season, Boston beat them in 5. OpTic then beat them in the minor in 5. They played them again at Major 3. They lost 3-0. They played them again Major 4 qualifiers. They lost in 5. So they played 4 times this season. Boston have actually got the head-to-head against OpTic, but of course now it is a rather different team to what we saw today. But the most recent time they played was online, and that was with Mercules in the team, right? They were the same rosters as today, and guess what, right? They won the Hacienda Hardpoint, they won the Hacienda Search Game 5, they beat them in 5, winning a couple of Search and Destroys. You know, this is the series that Boston will be looking at to try and model this result on, but obviously OpTic are still going to be the favourites. The rest of the bracket is fascinating on the loser side. Like, honestly, I don't know who's coming out of this losers bracket. I don't think it's Ultra. Like, they've not impressed me. I think that Ultra are likely losing to Surge on the evidence of yesterday. And also Surge have done this a couple of times already this season. Heretics FaZe. I mean, look, I'm going to lean FaZe in this. Until FaZe don't make the losers bracket run, I'm going to predict them to make the losers bracket run. But, like, that's such a... I mean, for FaZe, they've got to beat Heretics, not easy. They've maybe got to beat Surge or even Ultra. But let's say it's Surge. They play like they did against Thieves. Surge have been a difficult matchup for FaZe a lot of the time. Then they'll play a Boston team, potentially, or even OpTic, and then who knows what the grand finals is. I don't know. It's fascinating. Intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.